Could the Red Sox move on from their number 2 prospect this winter? What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Red Sea Radio. My name is Corbin, and in today's video, we're going to be continuing our look at potential trade options for the Boston Red Sox and talk about the potential of trading Marcelo Mayer. We're going to be looking at the pros and the cons to ultimately decide if this is something we think the Red Sox should do. Thank you all very much for clicking on this one. Let's get into it. Okay, so like we've been doing in every single one of these potential trade videos, let's take a look at the pros of trading Marcelo Mayer first before we get into some of the cons. And I think when we're looking at what the potential pros of a Marcelo trade is, the obvious and biggest one is simply the value Marcelo has on the open market. Right now, you're talking about the number 7 prospect in baseball, according to MLB Pipeline, the number 2 shortstop prospect in the country, the number 10 prospect in Baseball America, and you're looking at a baseball trade values of the 3rd most valuable player in the Red Sox system, behind Jarren Duran and barely behind Roman Anthony. The dude had a fantastic year in AA with a 307 average, a 370 on base percentage, and a 480 slug for a 142 WRC+, 42% above league average production in AA with 8 home runs and 28 doubles. If the Red Sox are looking to make a gigantic splash this offseason and they're not willing to spend the money to do that, the best way to do that is to head over to the trade market. And the only way you are going to be able to land a true whale of a trade is to start thinking about including some of these top name guys, and Marcelo Mayer absolutely could be one of them. The second thing I want to take a look at in terms of what could be a potential pro of trading Marcelo Mayer is simply where are you going to fit him on this roster. Trevor Story is currently under contract through the 2025 season. Now, he does have a player option at the end of the 2025 season, but between you and me, if we're being honest here, Trevor Story's time here hasn't exactly gone fantastic. Even if he has a great year coming out of 2025, it really wouldn't make a ton of sense if I was Trevor Story to opt out of that deal and try and find more than $25 million a year for the next few years on the open market, right? He's probably not going to get that, especially at age 33, so it's more than likely Trevor Story is going to opt in. What this means is if you were to hold on to Marcelo, who I do think still has some time to go in AAA before he makes his major league debut, where do you put him on this roster? There are a couple of options here. You could hypothetically move Story off of shortstop over to second base or third base and have Rafi take over more of a DH role, but at the same time too, that's definitely going to mess up the infield a little bit. You also have the potential of trading Trevor Story and trying to make Marcelo Mayer your everyday shortstop pretty much right off the bat. Now, this is a possibility, but it's not a super likely one, right? If you were in the live stream yesterday, we talked about that potential possibility. You could also move Marcelo Mayer off of shortstop and have him become a different position player. Now, we've talked about the possibility of becoming a second baseman before, him coming up and sort of starting at second base and moving over to shortstop at some point, and that is a possibility, but Marcelo's never played second base in his baseball career. He would have to learn an entirely different position, which would most likely put a pause on any sort of promotions anytime soon in the near future. On top of that, you also have to consider Christian Campbell's coming up and trying to take a second base or an outfield spot. You've got Vaughn Grissom trying to take a second base spot. There's a ton of competition there to be your everyday second baseman. You could hypothetically move him over to third base and move Rafael Devers into more of a DH role. Now, at the same time, too, you could always split that DH position with Rafi and Marcelo Mayer, try and prevent any sort of injuries from both of those guys by splitting time off the field, which may not be a bad idea, but I got to imagine that might have a pretty negative impact on the clubhouse, right? Rafael Devers is 1, your highest paid player, 2, your best player, and 3, a leader in the clubhouse. To move him off of third base for a prospect that has never played baseball before at the major league level, I don't know. It just simply doesn't sit well with me. I can't imagine it would sit well with players in this clubhouse. Might not be the greatest idea to move Rafael Devers for someone who's completely unproven. Plus, on top of this, if we're taking a look at future potential here, Marcelo Mayer has one of the highest ceilings of really any prospect in Major League Baseball, right? We're talking about, if everything comes to fruition, a guy who is a well above average defender at shortstop with a ton of contact and legit power potential. He had 28 doubles in 7 77 games. Essentially, he is a guy who could hit 50 doubles in a season and give you 20-ish home runs. That is a big top of the order type bat. Problem here is that he may never get to that point, right? We've already seen a few injuries pop up in Marcelo Mayer's last couple of seasons. Now, personally, I'm not big in the campaign boat of Marcelo Mayer being injury prone. I think labeling a guy as injury prone at 19, 20, even 21 years old is a bit of a stretch, right? You are still a teenager, and Alex Spear put out a really solid article talking about why he may be suffering these injuries, and it has a lot to do with the fact that for most of his career, even in the early days in the Red Sox system, Marcelo Mayer wasn't really focused on adding muscle, adding power to his game. He was focused on staying limber and staying lean. Now that he's in the system and starting to put on this muscle mass, it's a bit of a learning curve for him. He's trying to figure out when to pump the brakes and when to push the gas. And I think that's a big reason why you're seeing sort of these different injuries pop up over the last couple of years for Marcelo. But just because I don't think he's an injury-prone player just yet, and that's a tough label to put on someone so young, doesn't mean the Red Sox have the same philosophy. If they are truly taking a look at this potential roster and taking a look at all the possibilities, there is absolutely a world in which the Red Sox sit there and they say, look, I don't know if we can trust Marcelo Mayer to be an everyday shortstop at the major league level. He has a ton of potential, a ton of value right now. Why don't we move him and create a legitimate big league player by trading as opposed to developing him and him becoming a great major league player in Boston on his own? I do think there is a legitimate possibility that that is something the Red Sox look at. So when we're looking at potential reasons why the Red Sox may want to trade Marcelo Mayer, I do think there are some actual conversations to be had here about the potential of moving Marcelo. But I also think before we hop on the trade Marcelo train, we got to look at some cons as well. So let's take a look at some of the reasons why the Red Sox might not want to trade Marcelo. I think the biggest con to trading Marcelo Mayer is as simple as his biggest pro, and that is, again, the potential value he could have, not on the open market, but within this team itself. Like we just mentioned, the possibility of Marcelo Mayer, if he can hit his not even ceiling, just mid-ceiling here, is a everyday shortstop, a guy who can play above average defense with a bat that very well could sit at the top of a lineup and be all-star caliber. That is a lot of potential for this Red Sox team, specifically at the shortstop position. As much as I am a Trevor Story truther here, he simply has not been providing that consistency that you need out of a shortstop in his time here with the Boston Red Sox. Getting Marcelo Mayer in here and having the potential that he does in that shortstop position could absolutely change everything for the Red Sox, specifically when we're talking about the infield itself. Craig Breslow mentioned it in his end-of-year presser. The infield defense was not good this year for the Red Sox. Now, a big part of that was because you had a giant hole at second base, but also because your Gold Glove defensive shortstop simply cannot stay on the field. If the Red Sox can find a way to fix that shortstop position, they are going to be in a much better place going forward, and Marcelo Mayer absolutely has the potential to do that. He has the potential to be the solution for the Boston Red Sox for years to come, and I think that's a lot of potential to just simply trade away on the open market, especially if it ultimately comes down to, at least in your opinion, the fact that he's had some injuries at 19, 20, and 21 years old. That is incredibly young to give up on a player, to label him as a player who's going to be injured the rest of his career. It's very clear to me that Marcelo Mayer could potentially be exactly what the Red Sox are looking for. The other thing I want to bring up here is when we mention the fit on this roster, right? We talked about how it would be pretty complicated right now to get Marcelo Mayer everyday playing time, but at the same time too, let's go back to the Trevor Story conversation. He hasn't been consistent in the shortstop position for the Red Sox, and a big reason for that is because over 3 seasons in a Red Sox uniform, he's played just 1 season combined, 163 games total in 3 years. And again, as much as I still think there is some good left in Trevor Story, that's a lot of potential risk you are taking by saying, hey, you know what, we're going to get rid of the potential all-star, potential superstar prospect this offseason. We're going to put all our chips into Trevor Story, because if you do trade Marcelo Mayer, you don't really have a ton of options in terms of backup. You've got a guy like Nick Sogard or Chase Meidroth, but they aren't exactly everyday superstar type players. Christian Campbell could could play some shortstop for you, but in most people's opinions, he's better suited at second base, third base, or the outfield. And then you kind of don't really have anybody. You wait a couple of years and hope that a Franklin Arias or a Yoelan Cespedes makes their way up. But right now, if you're trying to win in the next couple of years, putting all of your chips into Trevor Story being healthy is an absolutely massive risk to take. There's a very real possibility that the fit on this roster ends up working itself out simply due to Trevor Story's inability to stay on the field. Now, I will say that even if he is healthy, I think there's a possibility here that you can make both of them work at shortstop. What I mean by this is getting rid of Masataka Yoshida. Masa's a solid player. I feel like I put him down too much. I mean more so just trading him away, because if you can open up that DH spot, well, then you could put Trevor Story at some games at DH. You could put Marcelo Mayer at some games at DH. You could slowly work him into second base and get those guys a DH game. You could start to use that position as a more versatile weapon, and this would, one, hopefully prevent Marcelo Mayer from getting injured at the big league level, but two, hopefully help Trevor Story stay consistent at the big league level as well. That could work wonders for this Red Sox team, and all of a sudden, you've got a top 10 prospect in baseball and a Gold Glove defender with the potential to give you 25 home runs from the right-hand side over there at shortstop. I get real excited about that, right? That could be absolutely fantastic. And again, you talk about it. Is that worth getting rid of? Is that possibility worth getting rid of? And finally, I personally am in the mindset here, taking a look at the Red Sox current situation and what they need to get themselves back to being a legitimate competitor in the AL East and in Major League Baseball in general. And I think a lot of that can be solved by the Red Sox simply doing one thing, and that is spending money like a big league club should spend. If you get a guy like a Max Fried, the trade of Marcelo Mayer doesn't become a necessity anymore. You don't need to trade this guy. All of a sudden, it becomes, okay, you've got your top of the rotation guy. You could trade some of your mid-level players for some solid bullpen pieces. Maybe you sign another bullpen piece. Maybe you sign a right-handed hitter, and all of a sudden, you've got a really good problem on your hands, which is, okay, how do I fit all of this talent on the Major League roster, as opposed to a really tricky situation where you have to decide which of this top talent you need to get rid of in order to make room. If you spend money, all of these options become kind of unnecessary, and God, please just do that. Right? I don't know how else to say it, John Henry. Just spend the money and everything else becomes a whole lot easier to figure out. It's a much better situation to be in where you're saying, hey, maybe we could trade one of these guys. We don't have to, but maybe we could if the right deal comes along. And man, it is a real necessity that we get rid of some of these top prospects because we aren't going to be able to spend to get what we need. Those are two completely different situations. I hate the idea of it being necessary to move your top prospects because you don't want to spend money. And I think that's ultimately what this Marcelo Mayer conversation comes down to. It's a lot to ask of this front office, specifically of this ownership, to spend money considering their path forward over the last couple of years. So personally, I don't think they should, nor do I want them to trade Marcelo. I think he could be that good with the Red Sox. I think shortstop has been a problem for the Red Sox for a few years now. I think he could be the solution to that problem, even if you are to keep Trevor Story somehow on this roster. But I also don't think that just because I don't want them or I don't think they should, they won't. I think it comes down to whether or not the Red Sox are going to spend money. If they are not going to spend money this offseason, I absolutely could see Marcelo Mayer on the trade list for the Red Sox. And I think that absolutely sucks. I don't want to see it happen, but I do think it could happen. However, that is just my opinion. So let me know in the comment section down below, what do you guys think? As always, if you made it to the end of this video, do me a favor. Make sure you guys have hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. If you're new here, we talk Red Sox content almost every single day. Also, make sure you guys have hit the like button on this video as well. It just simply helps these videos out a ton. It's the best way to let me know you're enjoying the content. Don't forget, if you want to listen instead of watch these episodes, all you got to do is head over to your favorite podcasting app and look up Red Seat Radio. Thank you all very much for clicking on this one, and I will see you in the Red Seats.